One of the biggest and most conventionally accepted reasons to love Naruto as a universe is its massive cast of characters. While yes, Naruto probably doesn't have the most characters in anime history, that title probably goes to One Piece, it feels as though Naruto, out of every single anime in existence, spent the most time with the most characters, which led a lot of Naruto fans to have very differing takes on who they believed was their favorite or best character in the show. And even though there definitely are characters who are more popular than others, like Minato and Itachi, I would say that in the Naruto fandom, there's a wider diversity of characters that people identify as their favorite than in any other anime or manga in existence. However, ironically, this is also one of Naruto's biggest weaknesses. See, because the problem with introducing a bunch of really cool and compelling side characters is that we're gonna want to know what's going on with them forever. However, in the interest of not making Naruto as long as One Piece, if not longer, Kishimoto was inevitably hurried by his editors to get to the end of the story. And when you're rushing to get to the end of a story, unfortunately, side characters don't always get the time in the sun that they deserve. And thus a lot of characters that were genuine fan favorites in part 1 of Naruto fell to the wayside by the time that Shippuden came along. And this is a real shame because characters like Rock Lee, Shino, and Neji were forgotten by the wayside even though tons of people loved them. And unfortunately, their plot progression isn't all that was halted. See, because if a character only ever really appears in filler arcs that, mind you, aren't allowed to affect them as a character in terms of growth, power, or death or life, then not only are we not going to get a whole lot of plot progression for that character, but we also can't make them any stronger. See, because even though Neji, Shino, Kiba, Tenten, and the rest of their respective teams were in tons of the anime, because the tons of the anime that they were in was all filler, if they got stronger during the filler arcs and then returned back to their manga roles every 200 or so chapters whenever they popped up and were weaker than they were in the most recent filler arc, that would be confusing. And thus, unfortunately, a lot of fan favorite characters that popped up in part 1 of Naruto never lived up to their full potential. Kiba basically never got stronger than when he was a genin. Hinata, while she's busted out a couple of cool moves like in her battle against Nagato in the war arc and even against Toneri, has definitely never lived up to the title of the Princess of the Hyuga. Rock Lee, even though he has no reason to be any weaker than Might Guy, has never been shown to be anywhere close to Might Guy in strength. And Neji, well, Neji became the world's baldest porcupine. And thus today I want to introduce a new series on this channel, where we look back at some fan favorite characters in the Naruto universe who never got to live up to their full potential. Characters like Rock Lee, Neji, Tenten, Kiba, Haku. Characters who, given a sufficient amount of time and character development, would have achieved a lot more within the confines of Naruto as a story than they did in Naruto as a story. And using in-universe logic and in-universe feats, we're going to try to scale these fan favorite characters to what I believe could have been their full potential as ninjas. And I believe there's no better place to start than the epitome of wasted potential in the Naruto universe, Neji. And thus today we're talking the full potential of Neji explained. But before we get to talking about potential, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous and want to hear me talk about anime and manga that aren't Naruto and Boruto, go ahead and follow my other YouTube channel, The Weeb Commander. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Nanny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Talk is Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything happening in anime and manga. This week, it's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So, Neji Hyuga, the genius of the Hyuga, the prodigal son of the side branch family, Hinata's cousin, the balding hedgehog, the pincushion, a character who in part 1 of Naruto was hyped up as being a generational talent who all but disappeared in Shippuden. And while he did absolutely get stronger between part 1 of Naruto and Shippuden, not nearly to the level that somebody who was described as the strongest ever Hyuga should have. Because when you are the strongest ever Hyuga, and apparently the Hyuga are the strongest clan in Konoha, you should be one of the strongest people in the universe. And yet Neji, because of timing constraints, had his character boiled down to being a pincushion to push Naruto and Hinata together as romantic interests. But how strong was Neji? Well, it's a good question. So first let's go over how strong Neji was, what made him the genius that he was, and how he improved during the time skip. And then once we have a good and genuine idea of how strong Neji was in canon, we can use some in-universe feats from both him and other characters to try to scale him him to what I believe would be an appropriate strength level, at least based off the strength that he was born with and considering the fact that he was a ninja who never stopped training. So let's start this video off in the way that we tend to start these videos off, at the beginning. See, from a very young age, Neji was hailed as a genius. In fact, it was during Neji's battle against Hinata in the Chunin exams that Hiruzen, while watching the battle as Neji beat down Hinata, said to himself internally, "My God, those who called him the greatest genius in Hyuga history weren't lying." And mind you, that's coming from Part 1 Hiruzen, who at this point hadn't been vilified into the monster that we all think he is now, and was not only one of the strongest ninja of all time, but also a pretty good assessor of talent. And thus, about as early as it could be established, it was established that Neji was the greatest genius in the history of the Hyuga, a clan that, mind you, ties its roots back to Hamura. In 1,000+ years of history, Neji was the greatest genius one of the oldest clans in ninja history had ever seen. You realize with the information that we know now, the kind of claim that is being made here by Hiruzen. For all intents and purposes, based off what Hiruzen is saying, Neji should be one of the top 10 strongest people in the history of the Naruto universe, or at least that he has the potential to be that. Now, mind you, in this battle against Hinata, Neji could have been stronger. See, because Neji was a member of the branch house of the Hyuga, and therefore he was technically forbidden from learning any of the clan's secret jutsu. However, with no formal education whatsoever, just from observation, Neji was able to learn and apply all of the advanced techniques of the Hyuga. Now, this could mean one of two things. Either that Neji was just a genius who was able to watch people and figure out exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it, or that Neji's Byakugan conveyed to him an ability similar to that of the Sharingan that allowed him to watch other techniques and emulate them. And Hiruzen wasn't the only person impressed by Neji. Hayashi, Hinata's father, Hizashi is Neji's father, the head of the main branch of the family of the Hyuga, was so incredibly impressed with Neji's prowess as a fighter that he believed because Neji was able to acquire this level of strength and rapid growth simply through observation, that Neji actually probably should have been the next head of the main branch of the family. In fact, Hayashi took it one step further than this. See, Hayashi didn't only regret not making Neji the head of the main branch of the family, even though his brother was younger than him and therefore relegated to the side branch of the family. He, while watching Neji fight, thought to himself that Neji had the ability to surpass every Hyuga in existence. Something that, according to the third data book, Neji did accomplish. Yes, in the third data book, it says that by the time that Shippuden comes along, Neji is the strongest Hyuga clansman to ever exist. And he was 15. Do you understand how crazy that is? Neji surpassed 1,000 years of clan lineage by the time that he was 15 years old. And I get that the Hyuga aren't as powerful as the Senju or the Uchiha, clans that descended from Hagoromo. Let's not forget that Hamura was also very involved in the battle against Kaguya, and while he wasn't the Sage of Six Paths, that's simply because he never took the 10 Tails into him. However, Hamura was powerful enough that Hagoromo trusted him enough to send him to the moon to watch over the Geto statue, which was essentially the husk of the 10 Tails, and also, mind you, Kaguya was sealed in that very same moon, and thus Hamura was sent to keep an eye on two of the most powerful entities in the universe so that Hagoromo could walk around like a hippie handing ninju out to all the living beings on Earth. So a clan derived from Hamura would definitely have some very, very powerful fighters, and Neji surpassed all of them by the time he was 15. And pretty much everything Neji did backed up this claim. Neji graduated from the Shinobi Academy as the top of his class, and while Neji wasn't promoted to a Chunin during the Chunin exams, he is the only member of the Konoha 12 to be promoted to a Jonin during the time skip. Yeah, not even Shikamaru, who was the only member of the Konoha 12 to be promoted to a Chunin during their Chunin exams, got promoted to a Jonin. Only Neji was able to establish the status of Jonin during the time skip. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that after Hayashi watches Neji beat down his daughter,
he goes, oh, we gotta teach that guy everything we know.
And thus by the end of part 1 and by the time skip, Hayashi started to teach Neji all the advanced techniques of the Hyuga clan. Now mind you, the advanced techniques of the Hyuga clan isn't all that Neji was able to use. Neji is also able to use fire, water, and earth release. And that was just what he was able to use prior to his death, which means that Neji, as a taijutsu specialist, had access to 3 elemental releases, which he critically underutilized, though he will utilize in our full potential version. But really when it comes down to to it, the true strength of any Hyuga boils down to the strength of their Byakugan. And Neji is undoubtedly the second strongest user of the Byakugan we've ever seen, whose last name is not Otsutsuki. And as we also never really get POVs into the Otsutsuki's heads, we actually don't know how powerful they are with their Byakugan. But regardless, with the usage of Neji's Byakugan, he was able to see in basically 360 degrees, which is standard for all Byakugan users, so you're probably saying, Nick, why are you bringing that up? Well, because so far as we know, Neji is the only Hyuga who's ever tried to battle back against the blind spot that exists in the Byakugan. See, because while the Byakugan does grant a near 360 degree view of everything around a Byakugan user, above the second cervical spine in the neck of a Byakugan user exists a cone of a blind spot. That is to say that essentially a cone rises out from the back of a Byakugan user, and within that cone, they cannot see. Now, Neji always hated this, viewing a blind spot in the Byakugan as a hole in his armor. And he wasn't wrong in this assessment, as people who knew about the blind spot in the Byakugan would aim at said blind spot. Oh, I'm sorry, the blind spot is above the third thoracic upper vertebrae. Wow, since I took an anatomy class. However, even though Neji trained to get rid of this blind spot, he was unable to do so. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't able to nullify the weakness of the blind spot. See, because Neji did something that no other Hyuga in the history of the Hyuga had ever done, so far as we know. See, Neji, upon identifying the fact that he wouldn't be able to get rid of this blind spot, instead decided to emit chakra from this blind spot's tenketsu point and use that chakra essentially as a sensor. See, if Neji filled this cone of a blind spot with chakra emitted from a tenketsu point, anything that came into contact with that chakra he would be able to sense and react to. And that is really important. If we're trying to figure out exactly how strong Neji could be, his ability to selectively choose a tenketsu point and fire chakra off from it in either a form of defense or censoring, then that gives us a fantastic indication into just how powerful Neji could be. On top of this, Neji was able to use his Byakugan to see in all directions up to at least 800 meters. And I say at least 800 meters because technically the best all-directional feat we have from Neji is him identifying a talisman from 800 meters away. However, the sheer precision with which Neji is able to wield his Byakugan is awe-inspiring. See, when Kakashi identifies that there's 5 talismans making a seal around the area that they're in, and I believe chapter 262 or chapter 263, Neji activates his Byakugan and within mere moments identifies 4 talismans in 4 cardinal directions that are at least 300 meters away. That means that Neji swept an entire area almost 1 kilometer wide and was able to find 4 pieces of paper in seconds. That is insane. The amount of mental computing power it would take to process all of that information, and let alone in seconds, is absolutely nuts. And that's just the long-range capabilities of the Byakugan. See, the Byakugan is also incredibly useful in hand-to-hand combat, as by watching somebody's tenketsu points and the flow of chakra in their body, Neji and a lot of Byakugan users have a form of precognition. They're able to see where the chakra in your body is flowing towards. Are you creating a Chidori? Are you welling chakra in your stomach? How are you moving? Which is why Neji and a lot of Byakugan users are so incredibly hard to hit in taijutsu bouts, especially when you tie into the fact that if you get close to Neji, he's probably the most practiced user of Gentle Fist in existence, and therefore using the 64 palms or the 128 palms, of which he's the only person to ever use, mind you. Neji is able to systematically shut down chakra points throughout somebody's body to make them either unable to use chakra or, even better, unable to move, as the flow of the chakra circulatory system is very similar to the flow of the blood circulatory system for people who live in the Naruto universe, and therefore no chakra, no movement, no bodily functions. But let's circle back to that thing I said earlier. See, while we've seen tons of members of the Hyuga clan use 64 palms, 8 trigrams, 64 palms, Neji is the only person we've ever seen use 8 trigrams, 128 palms, and he used it to destroy a legion of spiders that were being cast down on him during the Sasuke retrieval arc. But what does this upgrade from 64 to 128 mean? Well, 1, it means that Neji is going to deliver double the strikes in the same amount of time, and 2, it increases the range with which Neji can strike from, which is why an additional circle appears around his 8 trigrams formation. Now, technically, Neji only ever does this in the anime, so it's technically a filler technique, but I like it, so we're keeping it. But Neji being able to use this technique means that he's effectively able to use Gentle Fist twice the speed of even the most talented Hyuga members, and also from a greater distance away. On top of this, Neji's also able to use defensive Gentle Fist techniques like Revolving Heaven, which expels chakra from all 361 of his Tenketsu points simultaneously as he spins in a circle, making a circle of impenetrable chakra around him. And if he's unable to do a little spinny spin, he's still able to fire chakra from all of his Tenketsu points to break himself out of things like Water Prison Jutsu. On top of this, Neji has long-range options. See, while usually Gentle Fist is only ever associated with stabbing somebody's Tenketsu points, Neji is also able to use something known as 8 trigrams Vacuum Palm, which allows him to create a compressed pocket of air in his hand that he's able to fire off like a wall of air, like a gale-based wind release attack, even though ironically he's never listed down as somebody who's able to use wind release. But hey, if you're able to fire walls of air that are strong enough they're able to deflect an attack from the Ten Tails, you're gonna go down in my book as being able to use wind release. And thus, when it really comes down to it, the Neji we got was able to use earth, wind, fire, and water release. See, with incredible precision, up to a kilometer in all directions simultaneously, strike at twice the speed of any other Hyuga in recorded history, release chakra from either all of his Tenketsu points or individual Tenketsu points so fast that it was able to redirect attacks or break him out of things like the Water Prison Jutsu, and oh yeah, was said to be the strongest Hyuga ever. So with all that laid out in front of you, you might be thinking, well, then it sounds like Neji might have hit his full potential anyways, right? I mean, while sure, he may not have gotten the plot progression we would have hoped for, but it still sounds like he was training off screen and got stronger as the story continued. And you're right, he did get stronger, but not strong enough. See, Neji, by the end of his life in the 4th grade Shinobi World War, while a strong Hyuga, was just that. A strong Hyuga. His skills didn't massively outshine people like his father, his uncle, or even really Hinata. And this is corroborated by the fact that he is the only notable Hyuga to die during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. Now, while you might be saying, well, yeah, but his death was symbolic because he had struggled with the identity of being the person who was supposed to protect Hinata his entire life, but in his final moment, he decided of his own volition to protect Hinata. It was a gorgeous moment in a full circle. And yeah, that's what Kishimoto wanted you to think. I think it rings closer to the fact that Neji was correct in his original assertion in his battle against Naruto, that regardless of how hard you try, you're never greater than the circumstance of your birth. But sure, we could also say it was Neji taking his life into his own hands and deciding to protect somebody who mattered to him, but that doesn't matter. What does matter is that by the time that the 4th Great Shinobi World War comes around and Neji is reintroduced into the story in really any sense whatsoever, for the first time since the Sasuke retrieval arc, is not definitively stronger than really any of the other Hyugas on the battlefield. At least not in the way that he should be. While yes, he might be stronger than a couple of the Hyugas, he's supposed to be the strongest Hyuga in the history of Hyugas. He should trounce their efforts. But why doesn't he? Well, because Neji uses the same abilities as all other Hyugas, and while there is absolutely room to be way more impressive in the Hyuga techniques and therefore much more powerful than other Hyugas, Neji is the most powerful Hyuga of all time, should have had some techniques that were unique to him. And this isn't a crazy or out-of-the-box idea for Hyugas in the Naruto universe, as Hinata has several techniques specific to her and her alone. In fact, it was shown to us in the anime that Neji and Hinata worked together to help Hinata build the Twin Lion Fist, as she expelled the chakra out of the Tenketsu points in her hands and used precise chakra control to mold it into her lions. But the Hinata also showed in the anime the ability to create water senbon that she only used to kill a bunch of bees, but the idea of chakra senbon, especially when tied together with Gentle Fist, is actually a kind of broken idea, and thus Hinata somewhat perplexingly got the treatment that Neji always should have. See, while I have absolutely no qualms about making Hinata strong, I'm not saying that both of them can't be strong. In fact, I think there's genuinely more to gain by making Hinata strong than making Neji strong. If you're gonna give Hinata the ability to get strong off the back of techniques specific to her, Neji should most likely receive the same treatment. But Neji's specific techniques wouldn't necessarily have to manifest as things like the Twin Lion Fist or even the Water Senbon. Neji's specific techniques could simply be far beyond what was identified as advanced applications of things like the Gentle Fist techniques. See, because like we've already established, and established early in the story, mind you, Neji not only has the ability to fire chakra from all 361 of his Tenketsu points simultaneously, but he has the ability to fire chakra from individual Tenketsu points, which is how he was able to sense and redirect the projectile that was being fired down his blind spot. Well, the human body in the Naruto universe is covered in 361 Tenketsu points. When Neji wants to go on the defensive and make sure that who's ever coming towards him isn't going to get to hit him, he fires chakra from all 361 of these Tenketsu points. And therefore, it's stated that Revolving Heaven is incredibly chakra depletive, and why wouldn't it be? However, when you consider how the Byakugan works, the idea of Revolving Heaven is actually kind of redundant. See, Revolving Heaven offers 360-degree protection, but one could argue so does the Byakugan if used correctly. And thus, why would you need to fire off chakra from all 361 Tenketsu points and spin when in actuality your vision already goes in 360 directions and you have the ability to fire chakra from all 361 Tenketsu points? And therefore, a practiced Byakugan and Gentle Fist user should have an ability somewhat similar to Shikatsu Myaku. You know, Kimimaru's Bone Kekkei Genkai. See, because while Kimimaru's Bone Kekkei Genkai allowed him to create incredibly powerful and strong spine swords and finger bullets, the true strength of it was that Kimimaru could grow bones around his body that would stop him from being able to be hit. And an advanced application of Gentle Fist should be no different. See, because we've already talked about the fact that the Byakugan grants you some form of precognition, and therefore your average Byakugan user is not only going to be faster, but have better reaction times than your average non-Byakugan user. Now scale that up to supposedly the strongest Byakugan user of all time, and you have somebody who is massively faster and has massively faster reaction times than basically everybody. And therefore, if it comes down to a taijutsu fight, Neji should have the time to react by using his Byakugan to incoming projectiles or attacks. And while other ninjas would either have to deflect these projectiles with a kunai or block the attacks with a leg or an arm, Neji is an advanced user of the Gentle Fist, and the Byakugan wouldn't necessarily be burdened with this task. See, because let's say, hypothetically, Neji's throwing a right hook up high towards your chin, but you're ducked in and you're throwing a right hook lower towards his liver. If you were going to land the punch first, or even simultaneously as Neji, it would be in his best interest to dodge or redivert his own attack to switch to a block. But in the case of somebody with skills like Neji has, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. See, Neji can identify exactly where you're going to attack, and without breaking stride in his own attack, he could fire off chakra from the Tenketsu point that you're going to hit and stop your fist, which means that Neji at his full potential could have one of the most interesting fighting styles we've ever seen. Imagine watching Neji using Gentle Fist to strike Tenketsu points, only worried about offense because he knows whenever somebody tries to strike back, he's going to be able to redirect their fist with a blast of chakra. Do you understand from a choreography standpoint how cool that would be? Somebody's just getting dotted up with Gentle Fist, their body shutting down on them, but they're able to roll out of the Gentle Fist barrage, and they're about to stab Neji in the back, but chakra comes out and fires and hits the kunai and directs it above Neji's head, and he turns around and continues his barrage. That would be sick. Ties into the fact that Neji would probably be able to do this against multiple opponents simultaneously because, as we've already established, he's able to see 1 kilometer in all directions, and him at his full potential is probably much greater than that when you consider the fact that in the last, Hinata, when focusing in a singular direction, is able to see 20 kilometers away, and Neji could become one of the most versatile taijutsu fighters of all time. That consumes 360 times less chakra than a Revolving Heaven. Do you understand what I'm saying here? If Neji focused more on the precision of the chakra he was firing out of his Tenketsu points, he would be able to block 361 blows for the price of 1 Revolving Heaven, which would mean that Neji would invariably basically never run out of chakra. Because while yes, continued usage of the Byakugan is incredibly draining from both a stamina and chakra standpoint, if Neji was able to bust out multiple Revolving Heavens in a row, and he was, if we assume that he's able to use Revolving Heaven 5 to 6 times in a day, that would mean he'd be able to reflect 1,200 to 1,500 strikes individually. And it gets crazier than that. See, like we've established, Neji has the ability to use earth, fire, and water release. In a world where Neji applied the principle being able to fire out chakra out of certain Tenketsu points, there is technically nothing stopping Neji from applying elemental releases to these bursts of chakra. What do I mean by that? Well, there's no rules in Naruto that state elemental releases have to come from somewhere. Yes, a lot of fire releases come from the mouth, but Chidori is just a collapsed Rasengan. The Rasengan is just an amassing of chakra in your hand. Mud Walls is flowing your chakra into the ground and reforming it into a wall, and so on and so forth. The reason a lot of jutsu end up coming from your mouth is because chakra wells in the stomach, and therefore many jutsu focus on welling the chakra from the stomach and out through the mouth. However, like I've already established, there's no rule that jutsu need to be applied from certain areas, especially basic ones. And therefore Neji, through the usage of hand signs, would probably be able to fire out elemental releases from each and every single one of his tenketsu points. Meaning that if hypothetically somebody was trying to strike him in the rib cage, he would be able to fire out a blast of fire to meet their fist. Or water, or the earth, kind of. Earth is weird. Well, there is some earth techniques that absolutely do come from the user's body. Most earth techniques revolve around augmenting the earth. Well, these are just Neji's up-close and personal options. See, Neji never invested in the plethora of different jutsus that Hinata was using because Hinata had always been weaker than Neji, and therefore she had to find a way to close the gap. However, when Hinata started using water needles, the entirety of the Naruto fandom had a bright idea. And that was, if a Gentle Fist user were to apply chakra to a Senbon and strike a tenketsu point with it from a distance away, what's stopping that Gentle Fist user from being able to shut down a tenketsu point from a distance? I mean, using Gentle Fist from a distance isn't something unheard of, as 8 trigrams vacuum palm is a Gentle Fist technique. And therefore, if we really wanted Neji to explore the fullness of his potential, Neji incorporating some kind of chakra-infused shuriken jutsu or senbon jutsu to strike at the tenketsu points of his enemies from a distance would be a fantastic way to do so. Tie this into the fact that Neji was able to use vacuum palm, and so powerfully, mind you, that with the help of Hinata, he was able to repel one of the attacks from the 10 tails pre-blank period, mind you, when everybody else got insanely powerful, and Neji would have a plethora of long-range options if taijutsu was out of the question, and thus Neji's legendary sensor abilities that allowed for him to see at least 1 kilometer in all directions and figure out everything that was going on in that 1 kilometer diameter immediately, the abilities to not have to worry about defense as he fired chakra from all of his tenketsu points, blocking the strikes of others, and long-range options in the form of senbon, shuriken, and vacuum palm, there'd really be no reason for us to say that Neji shouldn't be considered at his full potential in the same categorization as Team 7. As the strongest Hyuga in history, he should be considered alongside the strongest Uchiha and the strongest Uzumaki in existence. And the true irony of all of this is that Neji's kit would fare better in battles against Otsutsuki's. Because, well, sure, you can absolutely say that Neji wouldn't have the ability to keep up with high-end Otsutsuki's like Ishiki, because even Sasuke wasn't able to do it. Against lower-end Otsutsuki's like Kinshiki, Momoshiki, or even Kaguya, the ability to go Byakugan for Byakugan with all of these Otsutsuki's and shut down their tenketsu points, of which they definitely have, mind you, would be a fantastically powerful alternative to just firing off ninjutsus that simply get absorbed. It ties into the fact that Vacuum Palm is not a ninjutsu and just a pressurized attack of air, and yeah, Neji had his full potential, the potential he was supposed to hit, would be a fantastic option against the Otsutsuki. And yet, killed for plot. But that's life when you start a story with 12 individual characters who all have cool and compelling reasons to want to get strong. A couple of them are going to have to get axed from the story, and that's just what happened with Neji. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. What do you think Neji's full potential would look like? And who else do you want to see me cover in this series? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I feel like we're probably just gonna end up covering everybody who's not in Team 7, and then even then, I could probably still cover Sakura.